This is the future. And humanity is all but extinct.
First, they start skipping prescribed drug dosages. Then they begin touching.
I volunteer as tribute!
You can stop this. You can change things.
I know that there's something more.
Then we've only got one choice. We fight.
Fight the Future with Dan and Paul.
Hey everybody, welcome to Fight the Future with Dan and Paul. But also, this week, with Ian.
Hello.
Who is joining us for talking about Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind by Hayao Miyazaki. Ian is joining us because he actually suggested this movie originally. I was talking to some of my friends about doing this podcast, and Ian mentioned that it was like, hey, you guys should do Nausicaä. And I was like, what? And Nausicaä is one of those movies that it's a really great movie, and I watched it when I was younger, and totally forgot that it's post-apocalyptic.
Mm-hmm. When Paul asked for suggestions, my first thought, being a huge fan of the Japanese animation, thinking, what are the Japanese anime films that are post-apocalyptic? Well, there's Akira, there's Ghost in the Shell. Oh, Nausicaa. No one remembers that one.
Yeah, and it's one of the first ones we've ever done that's set like 1,000 years in the future.
Yeah, the apocalypse has happened, and all the aftermath of the apocalypse has kind of happened too. And they're in this whole new world.
Future people dealing with new future problems.
Right.
Including giant bugs, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Although that's somewhat common. I guess we've encountered giant moles before, giant moths.
Yeah, giant dogs. It's one of the side effects of the apocalypse is everything gets bigger.
Everything is huge in the future.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
It's partially the apocalypse, and I think it's just general totalitarian rule makes things grow larger.
So tell us about your history with this, Ian, with Nausicaä.
Nausicaa is a film that I got into pretty late in life. I saw it in my teens. I thankfully skipped out on seeing the original version brought over to North America called Warriors of the Wind, which Miyazaki has actually asked people to scrub from their minds if they have seen it. But oddly enough, it's a film that I went to after having heard the soundtrack. I was actually in a Japanese animation club in university going there, and they had a singing contest, and there's a song that I'd heard that I knew was from Japanese animation that didn't have any lyrics, so I didn't know any Japanese, and I got up to the front of the room and started singing la 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 la, and I had no idea what I was singing from, just that this is anime, and maybe I can, and I did win. And someone said to me, that was a great theme from Nausicaa you did. And what? Here's the tape. You should watch it.
Yeah, I was humming that song all like yesterday.
It will be stuck in your head for days after watching this film.
I also remember humming it for a large portion of my childhood after watching it again. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You actually moved to Japan after seeing the movie, right?
Yes. Directly after seeing this movie, I felt like I needed to be in Japan because that's where this. Now, it was a number of years later, and a lot more anime in my life later that I moved to Japan. But it's.
You didn't just hop on your flying wing immediately and go there.
Take the glider directly over to Japan. No, it was definitely an influence, and reading the manga was certainly an influence in my love of Japanese culture and the love of Miyazaki and the Ghibli movies in general.
Cool. We should say that Ian and Paul are in Victoria right now in the LoadingReadyRun offices, the Orbiting Underground Moon Base, I believe it's called.
Yes, yeah.
Still here in Italy. Ian's a recent addition to the LoadingReadyRun cast.
Right.
You did watch the Italian version. Paul, I know you said you watched the dub version with an all-star cast.
Yeah.
So, and I went ahead and watched, as is my wont, watched the Japanese version with English subtitles.
Mm-hmm. Right. So we're all going to be, when we do the plot summary, we're going to have big disagreements about what actually happened.
Who said what and who's named what, I think.
What? So
wait, the hero is Mario, right? And Chiara?
Yeah, right.
Actually, I do have one more question about the versions. Were both of your versions endorsed by the WWF at the beginning?
Yes.
Okay, good to know.
Mine was.
I don't think it was.
Not the wrestling people.
No,
this is the
World
wildlife.
Wildlife Federation.
That would be strange if Triple H just came out and said, "Yeah, this is my jam. I approve this."
All right, so shall we get into the plot for this?
The story.
Yeah, so it starts with a figure on a riding beast with a gas mask walking through this very strange, otherworldly forest. It's all made up of kind of beautiful pollen spores and fuzzy trees and things. We see that he's on some mission of exploration.
I gotta say, I love the gas masks on his little sort of chocobo
Oh, the
bird things.
the riding birds make me so happy as a bird fan.
We cut over to Nausicaa, who's flying around on her glider and also exploring the forest.
And we're seeing like windmills in this village that they're exploring, and in the background you can see something that looks like smokestacks or even cooling towers. So it's very unclear as to what sort of stage society's in right now.
Right. So they're walking through this forest, but the forest is sort of beautiful but creepy. There's all sorts of these big kind of bugs everywhere. They don't seem to be actually like actively bothering anyone, but this is not a forest that I personally would like to walk through.
No, everyone seems very careful about what they're doing. So
yeah. Nausicaa finds this enormously huge shell of this thing called an omu, which is an enormous kind of pill bug thing.
We should say that Nausicaa is a teenage girl in a blue dress and a gas mask.
yes.
Yeah.
Who seems very at home in this world, riding her jet glider around. The man with the gas mask is her uncle.
And she seems extremely competent in what she's doing. She's gathering these spores and test tubes. When she gets to the skeleton of the omu, she's on top of it, looking at trying to test it out with her ceramic sword, using gunpowder to actually blow an eye hole off.
Right, which is very cool, yeah. And then she hears this big commotion coming from farther away in the forest and realizes that it's somebody who is under attack from these insects that are in the forest, the sort of denizens of the forest. And so she leaps onto her glider and flies to help, and we see that it's the guy we saw at the beginning, who's Yupa. Instead of walking through the forest, he is now being chased by the thing that she saw the shell of, which is this enormous omu, which is just charging after him, destroying everything in its path. But
she pulls out this gigantic gun, first of all, and the first surprising moment, she uses it for signaling, not just to start taking pot shots at the insect.
Right.
And then takes the time to very clearly just shock the omu into, I guess, confusion, and then uses this sort of swirly bit to charm the insects and calm them down and send him back to the forest.
Yeah, so she obviously has kind of a way with these insects. So yeah, it's quite a neat image, this enormous, like 6 or 7 story tall monster with her just kind of standing in front of it, spinning her little insect call.
Yeah. She reunites with Yupa.
Back at their home in the Valley of the Wind.
Yes. And it looks like the wind is probably keeping those spores out of their valley.
Yeah, and it's this kind of beautiful bucolic area with windmills and little village houses.
And we get the information that this forest, which we now have a name for, the Sea of Decay, has been consuming more and more countries. And Yupa reveals himself not just to be an explorer, but a man of science. His goal in life is to actually just find out the mystery of this Sea of Decay and find out why it's doing what it's doing.
And he's been traveling along and visiting other communities and noticing that there are less other communities because places he's going to keep getting taken over by this toxic forest.
Yes. Everything's going nice and happy until, oops, here comes a huge airship. And we see that it's not just gliders, and it's not just sort of an agrarian society, but there are still pieces of machinery out there, huge planes that they end up crashing the ship.
We see that it's actually covered by insect parasites, creatures that are somehow jamming it up. But in any case, it crashes with apparently all hands lost.
Except for one princess from a neighboring country who implores Nausicaa to burn the cargo.
But it seems like it's not enough to burn it because inside there's a pulsating, sort of fibrous, gigantic, like a big heart inside the ship that it was carrying.
Very mysterious.
Mm-hmm. And a single insect as well. And they're very, very concerned about this insect and not killing it because, new information, killing a single insect is going to bring upon a stampede of these omu or other insects into the valley. So Nausicaa takes a great care in once again soothing this insect down and leading it back to the forest with her glider and her little wind whistle.
Right, the sort of dying calls of the insect will call more to come.
Right. Meanwhile, while she's doing that, the rest of the village is taking its time, very meticulously going over all of the plants and trying to remove any of the spores that might have come with this plane.
Yeah, they have tools that let them burn the spores before they can spread and start releasing toxic gas.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it becomes clear that they have this sort of constant battle against this toxic forest where their enemy is lighter than air.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have to constantly be vigilant for if there's any trees that are infected with the spores, they have to immediately destroy the spore or sometimes even destroy the tree.
Mm-hmm.
The next day brings a whole world of warships coming
Yes.
into their tiny valley. All these gigantic metal planes arriving and soldiers pouring out.
The mixtures of guns and swords and tanks. So again, this mixture of high civilization and medieval technology.
Yeah, literally light knights in armor with guns.
Mm-hmm. So they storm the castle, and we find out that Nausicaa's father and I guess grandmother are in there. Baba, the matron,
the village kind of
Crone.
wise woman.
Yeah.
Village crone, yeah.
But anyway, these invaders kill the king, Nausicaa's father, and we find out that she is savage and she is skilled, basically taking on the entire invading force of, at least of the throne bedroom on her own.
But she finds that they're after this big fibrous object, which turns out to be an embryonic giant warrior,
Mm-hmm.
which are these gigantic creatures that helped to burn the world 1,000 years ago.
A little bit of backstory. The god warriors from the 7 days of fire, which ended human civilization as they knew it. This invading force is led by a redhead by the name of Kushana, and her goal is to unite all the nations of the world together and burn back the Sea of Decay.
Now the god soldier, this giant warrior thing, is in the valley, and it's so big that the only plane that could carry it has now been destroyed because it crash landed. And even though they just arrived with like a dozen different planes, none of them are big enough to actually carry this thing out. So like, well, we're here.
Yeah, so we'll start hooking up hoses and pipes to it and let it start pulsating and doing what it's doing.
So Nausicaa allows herself to be taken as a hostage by the Tolmekian forces.
Lord Yupa goes looking for her before they take her away, and he finds her secret room in the basement of the castle, which turns out is full of these plants from the decaying forest. But they're not poisonous anymore. They're growing in clean water from deep within the earth and clean sand and aren't releasing any of the toxic spores. So she and 5 people get put on some planes to be taken back to Kushana's country as hostages. And the fleet of planes leaves and is brought under attack by a red gunship.
It basically tears the shit out of these planes, these big warships, and takes them all down so that Nausicaa's plane is crash landing into this toxic forest.
So she grabs the few people on her plane along with Kushana, her sworn enemy, and manages to escape from the big plane in a smaller plane and follow the glider that the rest of the hostages are trapped on as it's going down into the forest. And it looks like this forest goes very deep given how long they spend descending.
We never are given the full extent of the forest, but it's clear that it covers a large portion of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
They land in this kind of lake in the forest, and they find out that this lake is in fact the nest of omu.
And there are a lot of omu.
Turns out omu actually can swim.
Yeah.
Who would have known? And so they all pop up. Understandably, everybody is quite concerned.
Mm-hmm. We also discover at that point that the omu have some golden tentacles.
Right, they have little extra golden tentacles that they can pull out to kind of feel people.
Feel people and interface with their feelings, because at this point we get a flashback into Nausicaa's past at some point, where it turns out that she had a baby Ohm in her past that got taken away. Her father told her that insects and humans can never live together.
Everybody wants a baby Omu after watching that scene.
Yeah, how do they not outsell fluffy Totoros? They've got those chittery little tentacles. They're amazing. So yeah, but she meets this pilot who managed to shoot down the ship and kill hundreds of people. They basically begin to travel through the forest together and get stuck in quicksand.
Beneath the quicksand, they fall to the floor, and it turns out you can breathe down there. You don't need your mask.
Yeah, there's this whole catacombs underneath the forest. And maybe this is underneath all the forests. And not only can you breathe, all the soil and the trees and everything are actually not toxic at all.
It looks like at that point that the forest of decay has actually been cleaning the planet, taking the toxins out and making the water safe to drink and the earth safe to grow in.
But it just takes a long time to do it.
Yes.
It's been working on it for 1,000 years or so.
Meanwhile, back in the Valley of the Wind, the God Warrior egg is starting to look amazingly unpleasant.
Ugh.
And Kushana's assistant is having a little monologue to himself that shows that he kind of has the right idea, that maybe it's best just to let this thing sleep forever.
So Nausicaa and Asbel fly to Pejita, which is his home country, and find that it's been just wiped out. It's now part of the toxic forest. It got attacked by Omu, and they brought with it all the spores. Now everyone's dead. All their great buildings and towers are destroyed. They meet some soldiers there in a plane who tell them of their plan that's already been set in motion to...
They're going to lure the Omu, or lure the insects, into the Valley of the Wind to kill everybody, and then pick up the pieces and pick up the God Soldier after everyone's dead.
They want to recapture the God Soldier. Nausicaa manages to escape from the clutches of the Pejitans by changing identities with someone, and heads off in her glider to try to stop this from happening, to try to stop this rampage of Omu from overtaking her beloved valley.
While this is happening, the sort of little rebellion of the people from the valley breaks out into sort of full-fledged open combat. And the people from the valley all kind of retreat to this old submarine at the edge of the acid lake.
Right.
Which turns out to be, because it is a very, very, very old submarine from the previous civilization, and it's built out of some material that is extremely strong.
Well, the Kushana's assistant makes an interesting statement saying that it's the same technology that took humanity to the stars.
Yeah,
so I almost wonder if this might just be a spaceship instead of a submarine.
Right, yeah. And then over to Nausicaa, she's coming in, and she sees what's actually happening, when they say that they're going to be luring the Omu, what they're actually doing, which is seriously cold.
Yeah.
They have a little baby Omu that they're basically just dragging along in front of this enormous, huge stampede.
Carrying it in this sort of anti-gravity flower pot.
So she goes ballistic, naturally.
Yep.
If there's one thing we know about Nausicaa, it's that she cares about animals and their suffering. And she launches herself and tacks them and manages to take down this craft and take this baby Omu down to the ground. The Omu are on one side, unstoppable, rampaging, and her valley's on the other side.
And here comes Kushana with this melty god soldier.
It ain't fully cooked.
Yeah, so Kushana's like, all right, we got to take out these Omu. We got to wake up the god soldier. Her second in command goes, no, he's not ready. And she goes, no, if he doesn't come now, we're dead anyway, so let's do this thing. And yeah, God Soldier, not that impressive.
Well, the God Soldier itself, not that impressive.
Yeah,
what it's doing.
The God Soldier has an energy beam.
Yeah, very frightening, but is only able to kind of fire off one of its incredibly powerful energy beams before it just kind of collapses, because it is not actually ready to come out of the oven yet.
And this just it destroys a small swath of Omu, but by no means even a fraction of the whole stampede.
The moment arrives when the herd of Omu finally reaches Nausicaa and the baby Omu, and they're hurled up into the air by the impact.
Mm-hmm. And Nausicaa has been desperately trying to reason with this little baby Omu, and has actually calmed this little baby Omu, despite the fact that it's quite hurt.
Well, this baby Omu, it's been trying to get it to join up with the herd and push itself through the acid sea. And we should mention that Nausicaa...
That's not just a name. The acid sea is fully a giant sea of acid.
Very burny.
So rather than being killed, we realize that she's actually been caught by the Omu in the air. They're all in a circle around her, and all of their little feelers are out. And she's being raised up.
And seemingly healed as well.
Yeah, the little feelers have the ability to heal as well. Thousands and thousands of Omu are all sitting there totally motionless while these little golden feelers are sort of coming up. And they actually lift her up so she's standing, and she begins to be able to actually walk on these feelers.
Mm-hmm. And so Baba then asks, who is, we find out now, is pretty much blind, asks a couple of children who are with her to describe the scene. And we find out that Nausicaa is in robes of blue, rising in the east, walking on a field of gold, pretty much fulfilling the prophecy of what was laid out in the tapestry that we saw at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah,
Implying that she will lead humanity towards the blue land, where humanity will be able to live without fear of pollution and toxicity.
The rampage of the Omu is arrested, and the valley is saved.
Yes.
Thanks to her sacrifice, that she was willing to sacrifice her life for this little Omu.
Plausibility.
So in this section, we want to talk about the world and how it maintains itself, how it became that way, and other aspects of plausibility.
Humanity caused this.
Right.
All the toxins that have polluted the earth are put there because of not just the 7 days of fire, but because of everything humanity has done to the earth up until that point.
So the toxins are not necessarily the result of warfare. They might just be the result of people.
Yep, pollution.
I would imagine the warfare probably accelerated the process, but
it's not implied that it's specifically chemical warfare or spore warfare that caused this.
The implication is that the forest is sort of a natural thing, like it just sort of started happening. Nobody really knows why.
This was just the earth taking care of itself and putting itself back in balance. But what definitely caused the world to get into this state was a steady stream of pollution ending in 7 days of fire, when maybe we could say World War III happened.
Yeah, and we're now 1,000 years after that point. So I like this aspect of the movie, that it's in a world so far removed from ours that the culture can be completely different. Let's run down some of the aspects of this culture as we see it. How is it different from our world? It's kind of medieval in the way that people wear little hoods, and there's no cars.
But there are elements of technology around. There are guns. We find out later that there are planes and grenades and all sorts of things like that.
And it's very unclear as to whether or not these planes are things that have been produced recently, or if they've just been preserved over the thousands of years, or the 1,000 years specifically.
Even Nausicaa's glider has some sort of, it looks like some sort of jet engine on it.
So it's an interesting combo of this very high technology, but it's implied that civilization doesn't really have it together, that there's just a few small warring city-states. Similar to Mad Max in a way.
And definitely separated from each other. There is not much trade going on between these groups, it's implied.
Yeah, so the reason why the Valley of the Wind is drawn into this, basically a little tiny kingdom, like they have a king, and she's a princess, but it seems like there's only a few thousand people there, if that.
Right.
It's drawn into this conflict just because the plane crashes there carrying this weapon.
Mm-hmm.
What the other large players seem to want to do with that god soldier, they don't say that they want to use it for warfare. Everyone states that they want to use it to burn away the sea of corruption.
Right. Which they talk about has previously been tried with just regular burning, and it is a bad idea, because then the Omu come out and make that not happen.
Yep. Baba says, don't touch the sea of corruption.
Is there any evidence whatsoever that it's a part of our Earth, like a continent on our world?
Other than, I don't think we actually see any kind of shape of the land or anything that would imply that.
No, there's no maps. There's no there's no statements as to history of where these are.
There's no animals that are recognizable.
No animals recognized, and there's really no sense of scale either. We don't know how fast these airships are moving when they're traveling at top speed.
And the other thing I noticed is that like they don't seem to have like radar.
No.
Like there's quite a few encounters that happen between airships, but they seem to happen by physically seeing each other out the window and being like, let's go get those guys.
Yeah, the only thing I saw that was somewhat modern on those planes was one of the machine gun turrets seemed to have a flat screen on it, used for targeting. But
really,
yeah, you're right. It's
no computers.
No computers.
Do you get the sense that these other city-states are stable in their own way, that they're sort of prosperous?
When Yupa comes back, he's been sort of on this long journey, and he's talking about how
another village has been lost.
Yeah, that the corruption
right.
seems to be getting worse. Like, and you see, I mean, like when you see Pajit, when we see them, they're overrun by the toxic wasteland. But even before that, you can see that they seem to be in the middle of just sort of a plain.
Yeah.
Which is where you would build a large city, right? But it turns out that in the world of Nausicaa, being in a large flat area is actually a terrible place.
Yes.
Because it leaves you very vulnerable to spores or something. Like you can imagine in a big city like that, a few spores coming down and landing on something would easily get overlooked.
So why has it suddenly gotten worse in the scale of 1,000 years? Such that they can track it year by year getting worse. Is there any indication of that? Has it just reached some kind of tipping point?
I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Like it seems to, they talk about it going, like it does expand sort of as well as just the spores go on. The insects from the forest can also expand it. Like when the Omu go on a rampage and destroy something, if they then die, their shells are filled with spores.
Yeah.
And so then that will become a new forest. And the problem is that it's a self-perpetuating thing in terms of once it's in place, you can't get rid of it. Like you can't burn it, you can't destroy it. So every mile that is taken over by the Sea of Corruption is permanently gone. I feel like the different responses that the people have to it are pretty good, like are pretty, plausible. In the sense of, the people in the valley are relatively content because they're relatively safe, but people in sort of farther away in larger cities who are in a less kind of stable situation, they're sort of attempting to leverage their military might in order to take over places that might be in a better position against the encroaching forest.
And to take some drastic solutions like burning it all.
Yeah.
Right.
Scariness.
We have done quite a few different post-apocalyptic dystopia type scenarios on here. Varying levels of scariness. What about this one? The valley at the beginning of the movie is not too bad in terms of scariness, right?
I would say it's exceptionally cozy and pleasant looking.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously the sort of low-level thing going on with you have to be careful, but there's kids running around playing, and it's pretty good.
I don't know, actually. I given how well those kids understood that not one spore can stay alive, they must be drilled from birth about what happens if you go out into the outside of the valley.
That's true, I guess, yeah.
They're not terrified of it. They just know this is what you do.
Mm-hmm.
What's very clear in the movie is that sort of relative safety can be just shattered at a moment's notice, either by the forest itself, doing something unexpected, or by outside influences, the plane coming in.
So yeah, in a way, it's scarier than some apocalypses because it shows you that they have something to lose. They have this culture, they have people in this very close-knit community and a way of life, and it can all just be wiped out all of a sudden. Just a rampaging horde of Omu coming and just laying waste to everything. Nothing left.
And for no particular reason, too. Like, there are certain things that they know anger the Omu, burning the forest, or even sort of firing a gun near the forest they don't like.
Well, even that, it seems that that's not really common knowledge, that only a few people either remember it, because Baba is definitely interested in that. But Nausicaa constantly has to remind people, do not kill this insect when it comes in here. Hey, you, in the forest, you're
Right.
shooting insects. Don't do that. It's making them angry.
Right.
Okay, mental note. Somebody's always on the verge of fucking up and bringing a whole world of hurt down on them. Plus, it's very easy for your enemies to do that to you,
Mm-hmm.
as we find out. It's sort of mutually assured destruction. You can easily just press a button and unleash them on your enemies. And that's what happens to Vegeta, or does it just happen by accident? Do you get the feeling like it was the other city-state that caused that?
I wasn't quite sure whether it was like the other city-state that caused that, or whether it was like them trying to figure out how to do it, and then they messed up and caused it to happen to themselves.
But Asbel couldn't have been away from it for more than a couple of days, right? I mean, he must have fueled up back there. So that means that all that destruction that we saw, a pretty big city-state surrounded by walls, laid to waste, everyone dead, that must have happened in a matter of days, if not hours.
I would put bet on hours.
Yeah, so everybody's living with this sword dangling over their head.
Ceramic sword, let's be
Ceramic sword, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, once the Omu start moving, they can get. I mean, you have to like at the beginning we see Yupa on like a galloping steed, just barely keeping ahead of them.
Most people's reaction is run and maybe hide, and the only person we see who has any hope of stopping it is Nausicaa.
Yeah. So this is a world where we have very big, scary monsters. Like, these Omu are many stories tall with scary red eyes and tentacles. And we also see other types of bugs, like a big flying centipede and other things.
Yeah, I mean, of all the various bugs we see, the Omu are actually some of the more pleasant ones. It gets real bad.
Well, it goes all the way down to the fact, to the microbial level, that you take off your mask and you cannot survive for 5 minutes without this mustache.
But it's interesting that it's...
Wonder if that's why everyone has beards. Because it acts as kind of like a rudimentary gas mask. If
backup emergency
yeah.
beard filtration system. I did think it was... Yeah, that explains why all the women had beards, too. Nausicaa. Anyway, they're not depicted as just scary monsters. They're always depicted as animals who are kind of doing their own thing, have their own interests. And in fact, the scarier they are, the more likely they are to actually be positive forces, like actually protecting the forest, for example. We know that the Omu are protecting their own, and they're also trying to protect the forest. So it's a vision of a world where nature is taken over, but nature is actually kind of benevolent, including the scariest of insect monsters.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, it's nature is taken over and is benevolent towards the planet, but nature doesn't give any special dispensation towards humans, is the problem.
Yeah, I think it's all summed up very, very well by Nausicaa's father in the dream sequence, that insects and humanity can never live together, which is exactly the opposite of what needs to happen. They need to find a way to live together with the Sea of Destruction, with the insects, rather than thinking that you need to wipe them out in order to survive.
There's a couple of times, like, I don't know, if you've got like hay fever or anything like that, you know, where just the normal amount of pollen that you have in the air in the real world, man, that just hanging out for a little bit in that forest must be horrible.
Scariest thing of all, and no Claritin.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Hope for the future.
Now, we stopped right as Nausicaa had turned back the Omu.
Yeah.
But then there's a little sort of it's not actually even post-credits,
Yeah.
it's sort of...
It is the credits, really.
Intra-credit sequence that you get to sort of see the little valley recovering, at least to some extent. Pajit is not gonna... There's no good...
No.
There's no happy ending for those guys.
No. We see Kushana. She seems to be working with them. She's brought in some of her planes, and they're, at the very least, taking away their tanks and troops.
Yeah.
So, but what changes, apart from abandoning the plan to burn the forest? Is there any improvement in their status relative to the forest? Because it's presented as a crisis at the beginning.
I feel like by turning back the Omu, Nausicaa has proven that the Omu, and sort of by extension the forest, not necessarily have an intelligence, but have they aren't just this thing that's trying to kill everyone.
It's not an unstoppable force. It can be predicted and measured.
Also, at this point, presumably Nausicaa has enough clout with the population that she can be like, oh, hey, everybody, I saw underneath.
She is the reigning monarch of that particular kingdom.
Right.
She has fulfilled the prophecy of the ages. So hopefully people are listening to her.
Right, because before she sort of talked about it, but nobody would really, and also the boy talked about it as well, but nobody would really believe them, or they're in the middle of a big war. But so the big thing that's changed, I guess, is that people can understand that there is actually a point to the forest, and that underneath it, there's this good, like, I mean, I guess is the implication that once a particular area is completely toxin free, that the toxic forest will actually kind of die off and leave the good stuff there?
They've never found that anywhere.
They haven't. So I don't know. Then again, if you think about it, that area would be the middle of the toxic forest where the toxic forest started. So maybe nobody's actually gone that far deep into it.
These people seem to be pretty skilled at botany. Perhaps they might even want to consider going out into the Sea of Corruption forest and maybe expanding it out. Maybe taking some stewardship of that and finding ways to help it be more efficient at its job.
That's actually interesting. Actually, not only realizing the benefit of it, but actually helping the forest along to try to make it deal with the toxins faster.
I was wondering if they could actually go and live underground in some of those purified areas.
Yeah. I mean, there's
like the
water.
place that they broke down into.
There's not a lot of light, but there's water, and there's sand or dirt that can
nutritious sand.
I'm thinking that might be a translation thing, because sand is not good to grow plants in.
But yeah, the last shot of the movie is a little tree growing up beside her helmet down in the sand.
Yeah.
How would they do?
I am a warship constructor. So I'm imagining myself in the Tauromekia state, in something like a 19th century shipyard, riveting together these gigantic warships. And just like the Valley of the Wind, I imagine it to be an interesting mixture of the old and the new. I imagine it being very old-fashioned techniques a lot of the time, but ones that have been honed over hundreds of years perhaps, just like shipbuilding was. But somehow air isn't as big of an issue as it was in the actual 19th century. Somehow we're committed to flying a lot. Maybe Tauromekia is also gifted with wind, and that could be part of how it all works.
Right.
So maybe this is a whole world that's built on all the surviving communities have some element of wind, which helps to solve some of the aerodynamic problems. I mean, but these things are enormous. These take hundreds of men to work on them for many, many years. As far as a stable kind of lifestyle, I can see myself inheriting this job from my dad, my grandfather, my grandfather's grandfather, and that being a kind of way of life, even though we're all trembling on the precipice of being overrun by Omu. Also, I'm not sure that I'm that good at my job based on the fact that these planes go down really easily in this movie.
It's actually in my notes from watching the film that the riveting is very bad in there. You've got to be flush if the aviator has taught us anything.
So it's your fault. That's what you're saying. That's why the gunship is so successful.
I'm sorry.
Somebody's been cutting corners.
That tells me that, yes, maybe they're not as combat ready as they think that they are. Maybe it's been a long time between wars, and these might be actually old creaky warships that are not...
Or they're used to being the only thing up there.
Right, they're used to total dominance.
Yeah. Nice, okay.
As a layout artist, I might be able to work on books and whatnot, but that seems... let's go with that, yes. So, as a person who works in computers right now and in desktop publishing and film editing, there doesn't appear to be much of a film industry in the world right now, so that's definitely out. But it looks like there is still writing. It is still a medium amount of literacy in the world. People can read signs, and people do. There is actually a writing system, it looks like, that we see evidence of in the film. So I would think that maybe I'd be one of those people who actually brought back the age of printed word and the really old printing presses, movable type and whatnot, actually working at melting down and reusing the metals into printed word. And I can definitely see in the world something that would work well with the wind power that seems to be the predominant form of mechanization that's not, I guess, the fusion drive, because it'd be difficult to hook a fusion drive up to a printing press and have it work at all. And I can see that you'd probably want to go back into movable type rather than an offset printing structure, just because you only have so much material. So being able to efficiently make the letters and know which ones need to be melted back down into the raw material and conserving that and being very careful with it. The one thing that just occurred to me about why this might not work, I don't see a lot of sources of fiber to be used for making paper.
Because the trees are
There were trees, though.
There were trees, but those they seem to be more used for fruit. Like there wasn't a lot of disposable tree that could be ground up into pulp and then made into paper.
Harvesting trees from the forest is probably not a great idea.
Probably not,
forest,
yeah.
No. Someone might object to that.
Don't want to have to put on a gas mask before reading one of my books.
Nice, I like that. The glider is not just the thing that Nausicaa has. That's sort of that is a tool that the people in the valley use. There's probably, a job of, people probably patrolling like the edge of the forest on the gliders, which are designed to be nice and quiet, don't bug the animal, the insects in the forest at all, but so we can patrol the forest quite as quickly as possible, making sure that, people are aren't going into it accidentally. If you see anybody going in there who's got a gun, you go, no, don't do that. Or, the flare stuff or helping people out. But it's an area where despite the not being, not having the kind of almost symbiotic relationship that Nausicaa has, you would start to get kind of a feel for the forest. Like, those are rumblings that are going on.
Well, I think having a thin, light frame as well is probably a good physical attribute to have as a glider pilot, too. As a 6'4", 200-pound man, it's probably going to crash fairly quickly into the ground.
Yeah.
1,000 years from now, the forces of evil are everywhere. Warring nations close in from the south. Creatures of the dead world come haunting from the north. And the only hope for the future will be a small band of warriors. Warriors of the Wind, the most fantastic family adventure of their time and all time. Rated PG.
All right, well, that was Nausicaa of the Valley of Wind. So thank you very much for joining us, Ian.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
That was
thanks, Ian.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun and really a lot more upbeat than some of the other ones that we've done. It's weird how dystopias can be somehow kind of a downer sometimes.
Well, if you ever want to have me back, I have a lot more dark, dystopic Japanese anime futures for you.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so this is a Loading Ready Run podcast. And like all Loading Ready Run content, it's supported by their Patreon at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. And if you enjoy the podcast, you can subscribe to it on iTunes, and you can also rate and review it, which we really enjoy. You can also chat about it on loadingreadyrun.com/forum. And I have to say, I read that way too regularly, and I will often jump in, so I would like to hear your opinion. Our theme song is written by Bradley Rains, and the interstitial segments are spoken by Kiara Kant.
Well, thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening. And do you have the Japanese version?
I do.
Of our signature sign-off?
これまでオッズ、あなたのおかげでも良いです。
All right.
All right. Domo arigato.
どういたしまして。
Talk to you next time.
Bye.
Ci vediamo.
Perfect.